Hi, my name's Elowen, and the last words my sister ever said to me before throwing boiling coffee in my face were, "I don't serve cheap trash like you." She said it loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. The same restaurant chain built on my ideas, the one she stole and claimed as hers. Everyone laughed, everyone watched, until the door opened, and in walked the man they all feared, my fiancé, the CEO of the empire she thought she owned. But here's the thing. What broke me wasn't the coffee. It was everything that came before it. The years of silence, the lies, the betrayal no one saw coming. They thought I would stay quiet. They thought I would walk away again. They were wrong. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening and where from? Drop it in the comments. Because someone out there needs this story more than they know. It had been 3 winters since I last stepped foot inside Voss Signature, the restaurant I once helped design, the dream that used to be mine. Now I was just another guest, no reservation, no title. Just a woman in a worn coat standing beneath the soft golden lights that spilled through the tall front windows like warmth I hadn't earned. The door gave a muted thud as it closed behind me. Snow clung to the edges of my boots. Inside, the atmosphere was polished and pristine. The scent of roasted espresso beans mingled with the sharp tang of citrus oil from burning candles. Somewhere near the bar, a live saxophone hummed a lazy jazz tune, smooth and practiced. I kept my head low and wrapped my coat tighter around my ribs, as if it could hold me together. I didn't belong here anymore, and everyone knew it. Their glances weren't hostile, not yet, just curious. One of the waiters looked up from folding napkins and squinted. Maybe he recognized me, or maybe I just looked too plain to be inside a place this expensive. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as I walked toward the counter. God, it looked exactly the same. Everything. From the honeyed lighting over the liquor shelves to the dark walnut counters I had once argued over in design meetings, was untouched. Except now, it didn't belong to me. It belonged to Sable, my sister. I hadn't seen her since the day she slammed the lawyer's folder shut and said, "Well, if you didn't fight for it, maybe you didn't deserve it." Just like that, the inheritance, the business, the stake I built, gone. I approached the espresso bar, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, could I get an Americano?" The barista, a young woman with an apologetic smile, opened her mouth to answer, but then something changed in her eyes. Her posture stiffened, and I knew she was here. "Look what the wind dragged in," came a voice like velvet dipped in acid. Sable. She glided behind the counter like she owned the damn place, which, technically, she did. Her black sheath dress clung to her like a weapon, hair perfect, smile sharper than ever. "We don't serve cheap trash like you," she said, loud enough for the entire bar staff to hear. A beat of silence, then laughter. It rippled across the room like someone had dropped a pebble into a still lake. I felt every pair of eyes on me, and still, I didn't move. I stood there, coat wrapped around my body like armor, and said nothing, because if I spoke, I might break. I thought maybe if I stood still, maybe it wouldn't sting as much, I whispered inside my own head. But it did. Oh, it did. "Oops," Sable said, lifting a steaming cup from the counter. "Clumsy me." Before I could step back, before I could think, she flung the coffee straight into my face. The liquid was hot but not boiling. It didn't scald, not really, but the shock of it, the sting, the betrayal, that burned deep. The cup clattered to the floor, spinning once before settling on its side. A napkin fluttered down next to it like a surrender flag, stained and soggy. The dark stain spread across the marble like something bleeding out. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, dripping, blinking through the bitter sting, while their laughter rang louder now, no longer hesitant. They thought it was funny. It wasn't the burn that hurt, I thought. It was the laughter. Someone behind me whispered, "Is that her sister?" Another voice hissed, "That's the one who lost everything." Sable leaned in, voice like syrup. "Ah, don't take it personally. Some people just don't know their place." I turned to leave. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. My hand reached for the door, and just then it opened. The sudden rush of winter air chilled the side of my face that was still burning. But that wasn't what froze the room. It was him, Sterling. He stepped in without urgency, tall and cold in his tailored coat, snowflakes melting against the collar. His gaze swept the room, once, twice, before landing on me, soaked, shaking, silent. "Sterling," I whispered. His jaw flexed once. No one said a word. No one dared. Because Sterling Voss wasn't just my fiancé. He was the CEO, the owner, the man who signed their paychecks. He crossed the room without breaking stride. His hand reached for mine, gentle, grounding, and pulled me close. My damp coat stained his crisp suit, but he didn't flinch. His eyes locked with Sable's. And for the first time since I walked in, she was the one who didn't know what to say. And in that silence, I thought, I knew no one was leaving unscathed tonight. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sterling stood still, just inside the entrance, snow melting in tiny streams down the sleeves of his charcoal coat. His shadow stretched long across the marble floor, dark and deliberate. A quiet threat in the flickering chandelier light. His eyes weren't on the guests, not the servers, not the staff who suddenly found deep fascination in their shoes. His eyes were on me, on the coffee dripping down my jaw, the wet fabric clinging to my chest. My shaking fingers clenched so tightly around the edge of my coat that my knuckles had gone white. Then, finally, he looked at her. Sable. Her smile had disappeared the moment she saw him. What replaced it wasn't fear, not yet, but a carefully constructed mask of innocence. It was the same look she wore the day she lied to our father about the signatures on the will. The room was so quiet, you could hear a fork clink against a forgotten plate somewhere in the back. Even the live jazz had stopped. One of the waiters tried to break the silence. "Sir, it was just a misunderstanding. Really, a joke that went too far." Sterling didn't answer. He just stared. And somehow that silence, that cold, deliberate stillness, said more than any shouting ever could. It wasn't anger, it was verdict. Sable's face twitched, just slightly, and I saw the first crack in her confidence. She moved closer, her voice laced with syrup. "Sterling, listen. She barged in here like she owned the place. She was causing a scene. You know how she always—" "I know exactly how she always is," he said, cutting her off. He moved toward me, slowly, unbuttoning his coat as he approached. From the inner pocket, he pulled out a handkerchief, not the paper kind, but the kind you keep folded in a suit jacket, stitched with tiny initials in the corner. He didn't speak. He didn't hesitate. He lifted the cloth and gently began to dab at my face. Not the burn, the shame. Every pass of the fabric across my skin felt like an apology he didn't say out loud. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a reaction. This was a reckoning. He turned back to Sable. "You poured hot coffee," he said slowly, "on the woman who co-owns this restaurant." For a second, no one moved, not even her. Then a wave of confusion rippled through the room. "Co-owns?" Sable repeated, her voice barely a whisper, the color draining from her face. Sterling straightened, tucking the handkerchief away. "Every Voss property, every building with our name, is under dual signature, mine and hers." I blinked. Even I didn't know. For years, I'd believed I walked away with nothing but scars and silence. But somewhere in the background, without showmanship or declarations, he had given me something I'd never dared to ask for. He gave me my dignity back. Quietly. The shock registered on Sable's face like a slap. Her eyes darted between me and Sterling, between the staff who now looked anywhere but at her. "This is a joke," she tried to recover. This has to be a mistake. She gave up her rights. She signed." "I know what she signed," Sterling said calmly. "I also know what I amended." The floor under her seemed to shift. The way she clutched the counter now, not in power but in panic, made the air feel heavier than before. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. "Clean the floor." "What?" His tone didn't change. "Clean the floor yourself." You could almost hear the click of every camera phone quietly going up in the background. No one dared move, not even me. I watched as Sable's breath caught in her throat. Her hands, those hands that once held champagne flutes and manipulation like twin weapons, now shook. And then slowly she bent down. The napkin was still there, the same one I'd watched fall moments ago, now soaked, stained, cold. She picked it up with trembling fingers. No one laughed now. No one said a word. The silence that once caged me now surrounded her, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just stillness. When I turned to leave, I didn't look back. Sterling walked behind me, his steps silent but certain. As we passed the main floor, I heard the whispers rise again, cautious, fragmented, but my eyes stayed forward. At the door, just before it closed, I looked down at the floor one last time. The stain remained. Some things don't wash out, not even with power. When I saw her on her knees, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a mirror. I didn't sleep when we got home. Sterling offered to stay the night, just to make sure the burn didn't blister, but I told him I needed space. Not because I was angry at him, because I didn't know how to feel at all. He understood. Of course he did. The door had barely clicked shut behind him when I dropped my purse on the floor and walked into the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, just staring. My face was red, not from the coffee anymore, but from the heat still sitting beneath my skin. Not physical heat, something else. A heaviness that curled behind my eyes and pressed at my ribs like it wanted out. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I wrapped myself in a towel, turned off every light except the small lamp near the couch, and sat down. The ticking from the wall clock echoed like footsteps in an empty hallway. Outside, snow was falling, gentle, patient. The kind of snow that covers things slowly until nothing looks familiar. I lifted my phone, stared at it for a second, then tossed it aside. I didn't want messages. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want Sterling's assistant texting me to ask if I needed a medic or an apology basket or whatever rich people sent to fix something awful. I just wanted stillness. But of course, stillness never stays quiet for long. It always invites the past in. My eyes drifted toward the bookshelf in the corner, the old white folder half buried under a pile of unopened mail. Something about it tugged at me. I stood up, walked over, pulled it out. It felt heavier than it should have. I sat back down and opened it, my fingers tracing the faded label. Merrick and Voss, Draft Blueprints, 3rd quarter. I hadn't looked at this in years. Inside were sketches, my sketches. The original layouts I designed for what would later become the Voss Signature Restaurant. The exact same building where I stood tonight, soaked in humiliation. The memories came in fast, sharp flashes. My father, standing behind me at the drafting table, nodding with quiet pride. Sable, flipping through my sketches with that fake sweet smile she used when she was about to do something cruel. And then, the phone call, the lawyer, the will, the signature I never wrote, somehow already notarized, witnessed, filed. I didn't even get a chance to argue. I remember sitting in that sterile office, my mother silent beside me, as the papers were passed across the table. "It's done," they said. "Your sister owns the design. Your name's not on anything." It wasn't just betrayal. It was exile. I didn't lose a company. I lost my place in the family, at the table, in the story. I shut the folder, but I didn't put it down. Instead, I reached for the drawer under the coffee table. There, taped to the back wall, was a thin plastic sleeve. One I hadn't touched since Sterling gave it to me. It was our contract, a real one. Dual ownership, 2 signatures, his and mine. It had always felt like a gesture back then, like something he did to make me feel better after I lost everything. I didn't even know if it meant anything legally. But tonight proved it did. He'd never used it as leverage, never brought it up. He just held onto it, until it mattered. I stared at his signature, the way the lines flowed together with mine. He believed in me, not because of pity, not because I asked, but because he saw something worth protecting, even when I didn't. I whispered out loud to no one. He believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And yet, the gratitude was tangled, because deep down, a part of me still hated that it had to come from him, that it took his name, his power, for mine to matter in that room. I set the contract down and reached for my purse. From the inside pocket, I pulled out the napkin, the one I'd kept folded in my coat, soaked in coffee, now dried and stiff. I unfolded it slowly, laid it across my lap. The stain was still there, ugly, brown, uneven. It looked like a wound. And yet, I couldn't throw it away. That napkin was proof, not of pain, but of endurance, of standing through it, of not screaming, of walking out instead of crumbling. "It shouldn't take his voice for mine to matter," I murmured, and then something settled in my chest. Not rage, not revenge, just resolve. I stood up, went to my desk, and pulled out the old sketch pad I hadn't touched in years, blew off the dust, opened to a blank page. If respect had to be signed for, then I'd sign for it with my own hands this time. Not through contracts, through creation. I would rebuild my name, not because I needed to be seen, but because I'd earned it. The coffee didn't just burn my skin, it burned away the last of my silence. The next morning, the air in my apartment felt like it hadn't moved all night. I hadn't either, not really. I slept for maybe 2 hours, but most of the time I sat with my thoughts, watching light crawl slowly over the window blinds, the snow outside now half melted and gray. I was pouring a second cup of coffee when my phone rang. It startled me. Not because of the sound, but because of the name on the screen. Sable. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, letting it ring out into the silence she left behind last night. But curiosity is a strange thing. It whispers, even when your gut screams no. I picked up. "Elowen," she started, and just the way she said my name made my stomach tighten. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. "Ellie, I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking. I made a mistake." I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, eyes staring at the countertop like it might offer some wisdom. It's strange how apologies can sound like traps when they come too soon. She kept talking. "Can we talk, please? I need to explain. Can you come by?" She didn't sound sorry. She sounded afraid. I didn't say yes right away. Silence stretched between us, the kind that makes people twitch. Then finally I said, "I'll come by." The call ended before I could change my mind. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the Merrick house, The morning was well underway, the sun was barely up, thin daylight sliding through overcast clouds. The house looked the same. It always did, like it refused to age, even as everything inside it rotted slowly. I hadn't been back since the funeral, since the will. I stepped through the front door without knocking. The scent hit me instantly. The blend of rosewater, lemon polish, and some faint note of memory I couldn't quite place. That house had once meant comfort. Now it was just a shell with expensive furniture and nowhere to sit. Sable was waiting in the living room, wrapped in a pale robe, her feet curled under her on the couch like a woman in mourning. Her eyes were red, though I wasn't sure if she'd actually been crying or just scrubbed them enough to look the part. "You embarrassed me last night," she said, her voice trembling. But it wasn't regret. It was resentment, wrapped in silk and mascara. "In front of everyone. How could you?" I didn't answer. I just walked in, slow and steady, taking in the scene. The china teacups laid out neatly on the table, the sugar bowl, the polished tray. We'd done this before. She poured tea like nothing had happened. "Look, I know you're mad, but you could have warned me about your connection to him. You made me look like an idiot." I stared at her. She was serious. "I didn't make you do anything," I said flatly. "That was all you." Her eyes narrowed for just a second before softening again. "I wasn't thinking clearly. You know how emotions run high with us. We're sisters." I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say to that. Then I saw it. On the edge of the table, barely tucked under the silver tray, was a folder, one I recognized, one I hadn't seen in years, a folder with my name on it, or what used to be my name. I stepped closer. The top page had been marked up, red ink, legal print, and where my name should have been, scratched out, sloppily, angrily. "You're selling off the rest of the estate," I said, not looking at her, and forging my consent again. The room shifted. It got smaller. Sable didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch. "It's not like you were using it," she muttered. "Dad always said you were too sensitive for this kind of thing." My hands curled into fists, but I didn't move. "You took everything I loved and made me feel small for missing it. And you think you're better now?" Her voice sharpened, rising. "Just because Sterling, loves you? That makes you worthy? You think he doesn't see what you are? He will. They all do, eventually." Her words didn't just sting. They opened something deeper, something older, a wound I thought had scabbed over long ago. But I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I stood there, breathing slowly until the rage settled just enough to speak. "Next time you want to destroy me," I said quietly, "at least be creative." I walked to the door. No slamming, no grand exit, just the sound of my shoes against the hardwood floor. Behind me, I could feel her shaking. The kind of shake that comes when you realize your power is slipping and there's nothing you can grab to stop it. I didn't turn around, but I heard it. Her voice, low, urgent, desperate, muttering into the phone. "She was just here. Yeah, I know. I'll take care of it." My hand paused on the doorknob, and then I left. Outside, the sky was still gray, the cold biting against my cheeks, but I felt something else underneath it. Steel, maybe, or survival. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but pretending it's peace? That's the oldest lie in our family. Back in my car, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down and let the room go still again. But stillness doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the calm before your next wound. 2 days passed. I kept to myself, stayed in my apartment, moved between the couch and kitchen without purpose. I tried to distract myself, reading, cleaning, reorganizing drawers that didn't need organizing, but silence kept dragging me back to the same thought. She wasn't done. It was just past 10 a.m. when the email came. My inbox pinged with the same polite tone as always, but the subject line hit differently. Final notice of property transfer approval, Merrick Estate. I clicked it open with a strange sense of detachment, like I already knew what I was about to see. There it was, my full name typed in black ink at the bottom of a legal document, and just above it, my signature, or something that looked exactly like it. My stomach turned cold. My breath stuck somewhere between disbelief and something far darker. "She did it again," I whispered. I touched the screen like it would dissolve the lie. A paper cut doesn't look like much until it bleeds everything you still believe in. I didn't even change clothes. I grabbed my bag, slipped on a coat, and drove to the address listed in the email, Glassbridge Legal, downtown. The building looked sterile from the outside, walls of silver and glass towering above the sidewalk like truth couldn't hide inside it. I walked in, past the receptionist, through the security turnstile. They were expecting me. "Miss Merrick," a young woman said as she handed me a clipboard. "Mr. Langford will see you now. He's just finalizing the file you inquired about." I followed her through a hallway lined with framed degrees and success stories. The kind of place built to make you feel small. Mr. Langford was tall, gray-haired, and too polite. "We already filed the transfer 2 days ago," he said as he handed me a copy. "Your sister signed the approval on your behalf, as she's done previously. There was no objection recorded." I forced a smile. Did she now? I sat down, unfolded the paperwork, and let my eyes run over the lines like I was reading a confession dressed in legalese. Same curve, same slant. The same forgery she'd perfected 3 years ago when she took the business and my father's blessing in one swoop. But this time I wasn't walking away. "I need to file a counterclaim," I said. Mr. Langford blinked. "Excuse me?" Before I could say more, the door opened behind me. Footsteps, calm, familiar, sterling. I had called him that morning, not to fix things, but to ask how to start fixing them myself. I didn't expect him to come. "I figured I'd better see this for myself," he said gently, then turned to Langford. "She's contesting the transfer, and I'll personally make sure it reaches the circuit court if necessary." Langford straightened. Understood. Sterling looked at me then, something unreadable in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" It was the wrong question at the wrong time. I snapped, louder than I'd meant. "Because I didn't want to be saved again." The room went quiet. Even Langford looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't apologize. Sometimes love feels like another rescue, and I was tired of being rescued. Sterling didn't flinch. Instead, he walked over slowly, pulling something from his inside pocket. A pen, silver, heavy-looking. "I gave you that contract because I believed you'd fight one day," he said. "Not so I could fight for you." A tear slipped down my cheek, warm against skin that had gone too cold. I laughed, but it wasn't happy. "Then maybe today's the day." He placed the pen in front of me. "Write your own statement," he said softly. "Your name, your truth." The desk was glass, clean and cold. My reflection stared back at me as I leaned forward. I didn't shake because I was scared. I shook because I was finally touching something real, my own power. I filled out the counterclaim, line by line. I pressed my signature onto the bottom hard enough to dent the copy underneath. I wanted it to echo. Langford looked uneasy. "You're filing against your sister?" I looked at him, voice steady. "No, I'm filing for myself." The air shifted. I stood, gathered my things, and walked out. No one stopped me. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It wasn't warm, but it was honest. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I still didn't answer. I placed the phone face down on the table and watched the city blink through the rain-streaked window. The lights looked softer than usual, Maybe it was the glass. Maybe it was me. Love feels different when you're no longer the one being saved. Sterling sat on the edge of the couch, his back to me, cradling a glass of whiskey. The ice had melted, untouched. He hadn't spoken much since the counterclaim. His silence was heavy, not angry, but something harder to name. It felt like worry dipped in disappointment. "You know what this will do to the company," he said, without turning. I leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Then maybe it shouldn't be yours anymore." The room swallowed the words. He didn't respond, and neither did I. The quiet between us was no longer comforting. It had edges. Later that night, he went to bed first. I stayed in the living room, scrolling through my emails and deleting the same message 3 times before finally sending it to my lawyer. When I finally crawled into bed, his side was cold. The space between us had stopped being physical hours ago. By morning, he was gone. His suit was missing from the closet, the coffee maker had been used, but he hadn't said a word before leaving. No note, no message, just a gap in the routine. I opened my phone and flinched. 10 missed calls, 20 new texts. My inbox flooded with alerts, screenshots, links, and social media comments. Gold digger, snake, spoiled brat airing dirty laundry. I clicked one post. A headline screamed back, "CEO's fiancé sues sister in messy family feud, greed or vengeance." Below it was a photo, me, from the night at the restaurant, coffee-stained and red-eyed, captured at my lowest, now frozen for the internet's appetite. The captions were worse. Strangers debated my motives. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years shared the article with vague commentary like, "There are always 2 sides." I closed the laptop. When the truth doesn't break you, the lies will try. By noon, I was done hiding. I threw on a blazer, brushed my hair, and left the apartment. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray. It matched the mood perfectly. I walked into Voss Signature headquarters without an appointment. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. People whispered. Their eyes followed me, same as they had at the restaurant weeks before. But I kept walking. I stopped outside the PR director's office and knocked once before opening the door. She looked startled. I didn't care. "We're done hiding," I said. "If people want a story, we give them the real one, with proof." I dropped a folder on her desk. Inside were the original restaurant blueprints. My notes, my sketches, dated months before the launch. My signature, real and raw. The file included a design journal, annotated with the timelines, edits, and concept changes that only I could have authored. "This is the story," I said. "Start here." She opened the folder slowly, glancing up at me. "You're really doing this?" "I'm not here to be rescued. I'm here to reclaim what's mine." I turned toward the hallway, only to find Sterling standing there. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. "You were supposed to stay out of this," he said, low and flat. I stepped forward, just close enough for him to hear me clearly. "It's my mess too," I replied, "and maybe it always was." He looked at me then, not just at my face, but into it, like he was trying to see what had changed. Maybe he finally saw it. I used to think silence was grace, but now I know it's a cage. He exhaled, jaw clenched. "If you're going to fight," he said slowly, "then fight smart, but don't lose yourself in it." I nodded. I already did. Now I'm just trying to remember who I was before I let everyone else decide for me. We didn't touch. We didn't argue. We didn't promise anything. But in that look, something softened. A truce, maybe. A thread still hanging between us, not yet broken. I left without another word, walked down the marble hall, past the murmurs, the stairs, out into the rain again. It didn't bother me this time. At the elevator, my phone buzzed once more. An unknown sender, no text, just a subject line. "You don't know everything your sister did." And beneath it, one attachment. A single video file. That's all it took to make my hands start shaking again. The subject line had no name, no hint, just the word truth. It stared back at me like a dare. I sat there, the city outside flickering through the rain, the glow from my laptop throwing long shadows across the floor. For a minute, I just listened. To the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the old wall clock, the storm easing against the window. Then I clicked play. The footage was grainy, the kind you'd expect from an old security camera. My father's office appeared on the screen, dark mahogany shelves, the brass lamp I'd polished as a teenager, the familiar portrait of him that always made him look more powerful than kind. Two people sat across the desk, Sable and Sterling. They were younger, a few years back. Sterling's hair shorter, his expression tense. Sable's face wore that careful blend of innocence and calculation she'd mastered since childhood. She slid a folder across the table. "She doesn't need to know," she said, her tone calm, like she was discussing the weather. "It's better this way." Sterling didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the folder, his hand hovering over it before pulling back. His voice came low, almost regretful. "She'll find out someday." The sound of paper rustled, then static. The screen flickered, showing Sable's faint smirk as she leaned back in the chair. "By then, it won't matter." And then the video ended. Just silence. I stared at the screen long after it went black. My pulse thudded in my ears. The air in the room thickened until it felt like breathing through glass. There it was, the moment my silence was decided for me. Not by chance, not by law, but by the two people I trusted most. I replayed it, once, twice, then again, searching for any sign, any flicker of hesitation in Sterling's eyes, any trace of discomfort that might absolve him. But all I saw was compliance. He didn't look cruel, just complicit, and somehow that hurt worse. "You were supposed to be different," I whispered into the dark. I grabbed my phone and typed one sentence. "We need to talk. Now. No punctuation, no anger, just urgency." His reply came within minutes. "I'm still at the office." I didn't bother to reply. I was already putting on my coat. The building was quiet when I arrived. Too late for employees, too early for cleaners. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me to the top floor. My reflection in the mirrored doors didn't look like me. It looked like a stranger rehearsing how to break her own heart. Sterling's office light was still on. He stood by the window, the Chicago skyline behind him like a wall of cold fire. He didn't look surprised when I entered. "You saw it," he said. "I did." My voice came out steady, colder than I felt. He turned fully toward me, eyes tired, jaw tight. "It's not what you think." I crossed my arms. "Then tell me what—" "It is, because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like betrayal dressed in justification." He took a slow breath. "That video, Sable came to me after your father's death. She was scared. The company was falling apart. She said you didn't want any part of it, that you were grieving too deeply to handle the pressure. And you believed her. I didn't want to, but she had documents, plans, your supposed signature." I laughed, sharp and hollow. "The same forged signature she used to erase me." He stepped closer, but I didn't move. "I didn't know that then," he said. "Not fully. That meeting, what you saw, it was before I uncovered what she'd done. Before I gave you your share back quietly. Before you decided what I could and couldn't handle." The words hung there, slicing through the air. "I thought you'd never forgive either of us if you knew," he said quietly. And maybe I was right. I swallowed hard. "You were, because I don't forgive easily anymore." I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the small flash drive, and placed it on his desk. The metal clicked against the glass like punctuation at the end of a confession. "You decide what to do with it," I said, "but don't do it for me." He looked down at it, then back at me. "Elowen, I never chose her over you." I met his eyes. "Maybe you didn't have to. You just stayed quiet long enough for her to win." I turned to leave. The walk from his office to the elevator felt longer than it should have. The city lights blurred through the glass walls, and in each reflection, I saw a version of myself, stronger, colder, freer. Every woman has a breaking point. Mine just happened to be recorded on video. When I reached home, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop again, not to watch it, but to save it. I uploaded it to a hidden folder on a cloud drive and titled it simply, "Truth for Later." I didn't know when I'd release it, maybe when the timing was right, maybe when the silence became unbearable again. I walked to the window. The city glowed below, indifferent as ever. "They took my voice," I said quietly. "Now they'll hear it everywhere." Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, fading, then gone. But inside, something in me finally woke up, and it didn't go back to sleep. I barely had time to process the storm that had erupted before there was a knock on the door. Two men in dark jackets, polite but stiff, handed me a thick envelope. I didn't need to open it to know. That's how power moves when it's desperate, quiet, procedural, and early in the morning. I shut the door without a word, tore the envelope open, and read. Notice of Restraining Order Defamation Suit. Sable Merrick versus Elowen Merrick. Of course. "When they can't silence you with shame," I whispered, "they use paperwork." My phone lit up seconds later. Sterling. "Don't go alone," he said. I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Tired eyes, but they weren't afraid anymore. "I started this alone," I replied. Then I ended the call. I dressed in black from head to toe. Not as armor, not for drama, just clarity. No distractions, no softness. My only accessory was a flash drive that had waited long enough. By 9 a.m., I was standing on the cold steps of the Cook County Courthouse, reporters already gathering like buzzards sensing blood. I didn't flinch. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers, cameras disguised as phones, pens clicking nervously. Sable entered with her usual performance-ready flair, eyes red, tissue in hand, a trembling lower lip. She took her seat with dramatic care, like the chair might collapse beneath the weight of her lies. Her lawyer, smug and rehearsed, stood and cleared his throat. "My client has been unjustly accused. Her name tarnished, her business jeopardized by malicious and false accusations." I didn't blink. The judge looked over at me. "Miss Merrick, do you have a response?" I rose slowly, stepped forward. The courtroom hushed like someone had turned the oxygen down. "Yes, Your Honor, I brought evidence." I handed the flash drive to the court clerk. She plugged it in, and the room dimmed as the lights lowered. The screen flickered, and there they were, Sable, younger but already polished in the art of deception, sliding a folder across my father's desk. Sterling across from her, hesitant but listening. "She doesn't need to know," Sable said, her voice crystal clear. "It's better this way." Sterling, "She'll find out someday." The clip ended in silence, but the courtroom erupted, reporters scrambling, phones lifted, gasps breaking out like thunderclaps. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Sit down! Order in this court!" Too late. The truth wasn't a secret anymore. It had a life of its own now. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood still. Because this was never about revenge. It was about reckoning. Sable lunged forward. "That's fake! That's doctored!" The judge glared. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." Her lawyer whispered something to her, then quietly packed up his files and left without looking back. Sterling, stood up from the back of the room. His voice was clear, tired, and resolute. The video is real. I was there, and I'm done protecting her. Sable collapsed into her seat, mascara running, sobbing into her hands. Denial, then bargaining, then fury. But no apology. Not even close. I didn't watch her. Not really. I'd already buried the part of me that needed her to be anything different. Outside, the press waited. Flashes burst as I stepped down the courthouse steps. A reporter leaned in with a mic. "Did you leak the video for revenge?" I met her eyes, calm. "No, I leaked it for peace." Behind me, Sterling followed at a measured pace. He didn't speak. Neither did I. We both knew something had broken, and neither of us was rushing to fix it. That night, the restaurant was empty. Not shut down, just closed early. A mercy, perhaps. I walked in alone, the same place where coffee had once flown across the counter in a moment of rage. Now it was quiet, clean. A young server I didn't recognize looked up. "Miss Merrick, welcome back." No stares, no whispers, just warmth. I sat at the same spot, the same stool. He placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of me, black, hot, unblemished. I looked down at it, then around the room. The counter had been scrubbed, the floor buffed. Even the air smelled lighter. I ran a finger over the edge of the counter. "Finally clean," I whispered. The coffee steamed gently. I didn't rush to drink it. I just let it sit there, whole and still. A moment of quiet after the fire. Because sometimes justice doesn't feel like victory. It just feels still. Months passed, not in dramatic swells, but like the tide, steady, sure, and mostly unnoticed by the world. That's how healing works when no one's watching. 6 months. That's how long it took for people to move on, for gossip columns to chase fresher scandals, for old wounds to stop aching every morning. But I never wanted to be remembered for the scandal. I just didn't want it to define me. So I built something different. I named it Second Brew. It's a small cafe tucked into the edge of a quiet Chicago block where the noise dies down just enough to hear yourself think. The walls are soft cream like the inside of a seashell. There's a mix of wood and brick, and the scent of cinnamon always lingers around 3 p.m. Customers come in for more than just coffee. They come to leave something behind, a note, a story, a second chance. There's a shelf by the window lined with handwritten messages, words of regret, gratitude, forgiveness. Some written in shaky hands, some bold and sharp, all of them real. One slow afternoon, near closing, someone left a newspaper folded neatly on the corner table. I didn't notice it until I was wiping down the counters. The headline read, "Sable Merrick sentenced. Former restaurateur faces 3 years for fraud, forgery." I stared at it for a long time, not out of shock. That left me a long time ago. More out of, I don't know, finality. I folded the paper carefully, tucked it beneath the counter. "I thought I'd feel triumphant," I said under my breath, but all I felt was release. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting striped patterns across the worn wood floor. Outside, the city didn't care. Kids played on the sidewalk. A couple argued gently over a parking meter. Life, unbothered, moved on. Just then, the bell above the door chimed, not loudly, just enough to stir the air. Sterling walked in. No entourage, no tailored suit, just a simple jacket, soft eyes, and something hesitant in his step. I looked up, but didn't speak. He held a white envelope between 2 fingers. "It's the last of your shares," he said quietly. "From the company, you're free, officially." I wiped my hands on a towel and nodded. "Freedom's expensive." He smiled, not quite sheepish. "Worth every cent." He didn't sit, just lingered, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to stay longer than a minute. I let the silence hold. Before turning to leave, he paused. "I watched that video," he said, "every night for weeks. Not because I was guilty, though maybe I was, but because I couldn't believe how long I let her use both of us." His voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. It carried the weight of someone who finally learned to own their part. I met his eyes and said what I knew needed saying. "You don't need forgiveness, Sterling. Just honesty, even if it comes too late." He placed the envelope on the counter and walked out. The sun caught the edge of his coat as he opened the door. That moment didn't ask for drama. It asked for quiet, and it got it. Later, as the cafe wound down, I sat at the bar. The same kind of stool where my humiliation once spilled like hot coffee across a room full of strangers. A young girl at the next table knocked over her cup. The liquid spread toward her bag. She gasped, scrambled, apologized. I waved her off gently. "Don't worry," I smiled. "Some stains wash out eventually." She laughed nervously, grabbed napkins, and thanked me. I watched her settle back in, cheeks pink. I looked down at my own cup. Same roast, same blend. But everything else had changed. I used to think silence meant weakness, I thought aloud. Now I know it can mean strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything anymore. I picked up the mug, traced its rim with my index finger, the way I did once before, back when my hands shook and my voice stayed buried somewhere between fear and politeness. This time, my hand was steady. From behind the counter, I could see everything. Customers laughing, steam rising from the espresso machine, a toddler waving at his own reflection in the window. This was mine, not inherited, not borrowed, not bought through guilt, earned. Above the counter, hanging just beneath a soft bulb, was a wooden plaque. Carved into it were 6 simple words: "Respect is brewed, not demanded." That had been my mother's favorite saying. I never understood it when I was younger. I do now. A woman came in just before closing. She looked like someone who hadn't cried yet, but might if you asked her how her day was. I served her without asking anything more than her name. That's the thing about healing. Sometimes it looks like serving coffee. Sometimes it looks like staying quiet while someone finds the courage to speak. And sometimes it sounds like the bell above the door jingling one last time before sunset. "She called me cheap trash," I murmured as I turned off the lights. Turns out I was gold all along. She just didn't know how to recognize it.